few weeks ago I decided to purchase the Sony ZV-1F camera. We're going to talk about that today. So I've been using the Sony ZV-1 that I'm currently filming on right now for about 2 years. It's a great camera. It was marketed as a vlogging camera. I only vlogged with it once. I always ended up just pulling out my iPhone. I've had the 12, now I have the iPhone 13. Super convenient, it fits in your pocket, battery life is great, and if you drop it, there is no flip out screen to break. It is more robust than a point and shoot video camera, especially with the flip out screen and the lens. However, there are 3 shortcomings to using one of the latest and greatest iPhones to go out and shoot video in public. First one, pretty obvious, the video quality falls apart in low light. You can do things to kind of work around this, like turn the flash on and blind yourself. I probably would just try to find a street lamp or just try to use the lighting around me to frame myself properly. It really is not good. It falls apart in low light. Everything else is good, but it does fall apart. Also, something that people don't realize, if you are walking around a city, whether it's France, London, I live in New York City, holding your phone out like this, paying attention to your phone is giving potential thieves that opportunity to just grab your phone and go. Now you've got your $1,000 plus phone with all your data on it, and now you're actually holding all that information out here, vlogging in Times Square, Washington Square Park, somewhere in London, somewhere in California. And especially if you're going to be setting it up and like doing one of those shots where you set it up and walk up to it and it looks like the camera is just, you're getting some cool angles. To set up your phone on the ledge or put it on a tripod, that is way too risky for me. And that's a downside people don't seem to realize when they talk about vlogging on their phones in public. And then the third, the audio on the phones are actually really good. I do find that the audio on the phone gives a better sound than the native audio in the Sony ZV-1 camera. However, it falls apart if it's a windy day. It does not block wind. There are things that you can do to connect microphones, connect the windsock on Amazon, but at the end of the day, it's just more extra stuff you got to always carry with you, and it defeats the purpose of just being able to pull it out of your pocket, film, put it back in your pocket, and do those impromptu vlogs or impromptu filming. So that brings us to the Sony ZV-1F. This does solve those 3 shortcomings. It has better video quality, it's a 1-inch sensor. It does come with this wind muffler, which the audio does sound a bit tinny, but this is going to perform much better with this wind muffler on a windy day than just pulling out your phone and filming and trying to get good, clean audio. Also, this is $500. This is $1,000. I actually paid $1,100 because I opted for the bigger storage option of the phone just because I do film a lot more on this phone. With this one, $500, throw in whatever size memory card in there, get a couple of memory cards. So this does solve those 3 issues. Better in low light, better in a windy day as far as audio is concerned, and if you lose this, you're not losing your whole life. You're just losing one thing. And something else I also wanted to mention, the audio right now that I'm using from the standard ZV-1, I'm using the Rode Video Micro microphone. It is a lot easier with the Sony ZV cameras to just connect a microphone right there. You just throw it right there, boom, there you go, you're good. And then you can connect a tripod on the bottom, and now you got a whole big rig that you can walk around with. Whereas something like this, you need a couple of adapter cables, you need a bunch more stuff, and at the end of the day, once you start doing that, it kind of defeats the purpose of vlogging with a phone in the first place. Vlogging with a phone should be super convenient, and if you have to attach a tripod and you have to attach a microphone and attach a gimbal and all this stuff, really, just go with a point and shoot camera. So in speaking with adding stuff all over, the ZV-1 always fell short in a couple of things. It was marketed as a pocketable vlogging camera. I didn't find it very pocketable really just because of one thing, and that came down to stabilization and lens width. The regular standard lens width, 24 millimeters, it's a 24 to 70. I find 24 millimeters is absolutely fine. 24 millimeters this is my arm. So if I was vlogging right now, this would be my arm totally extended. I don't really care for the wide shot. This would be my arm a little bit closer. I think that the perfect angle for vlogging or walking around filming in public would be something like this. This is a little too wide, it makes you look a little bit small, and this is a little bit too narrow. However, if you turn on active stabilization, it does crop in. 1 second, let me show you. The image is actually a little bit tighter right now. Not a big deal if you're doing a talking head like this, you have the camera propped up. But again, this is now my arm fully extended. If I was just to hold the camera out with no tripod, this is too tight. Now I'm cutting my head off. My head barely fits in the frame. I would really have to almost extend my arm out all the way, and I'm 6 feet tall, so I have long arms. Still, this is a little bit too tight. Now the active stabilization in this camera is great, however, it just defeats the purpose because now your field of view is too tight. Active stabilization off. Now there are a couple of things you can do to remedy this. You can turn around and get a Ulanzi adapter, but now again, if I show you, all of a sudden, now this adds a lot more bulk to a Sony ZV camera. Again, the ZV-1F is about the same size. The lens might be a little bit different, but this is just a visualization of showing you, now you can't fit this in your pocket. Pocketable, not pocketable. Pocketable, not pocketable. Everyone said get the Ulanzi adapter. I think it's great, again, if you're using it like I am right now. However, the only time I can really feel that this is worth it is if you want to use that active stabilization on the ZV-1, but you want that wider angle of view. This adds a little bit too much weight and a little bit too much bulk. So now something else you can do is you can use a tripod. I'm currently using a Ulanzi tripod. I've used this one before as well. That can get you to hold the camera out. But now again, you got to carry an extra accessory. But wait a second, you do attach a handle or a tripod, an extendable tripod like this. Now your thread is, you're not going to be able to open that battery door because on the Sony ZV-1, the thread is right here. Now you have to add a cage. So at the end of the day, you take a pocketable camera, but you have to add a cage, you have to add an extendable selfie stick. Now the camera is heavier and the camera is no longer pocketable. You're right back to having all these accessories, whereas now your pocketable Sony ZV-1 is not pocketable. I think that was just a marketing gimmick. This is not a pocketable camera. You can fit it in your pocket, but how usable is it going to be unless you have a tripod, at least a tripod? And again, now there's something else you got to have. So you can't, where are you going to put a tripod in your pocket? You're going to put it here? I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense in my opinion. So having the ZV-1 being a pocketable camera, in my opinion, to use it, it's not a pocketable camera. It is, you can fit it in your pocket, but you could also fit a much bigger full frame camera in your pocket without the lens. But we all need a lens to film. So that is where the Sony ZV-1F comes in. It solves three main problems for me. The first problem it solves is it is a much wider lens. Now 20 millimeters, I don't really need 20 millimeters. I think that's too wide. It starts to distort things and it makes me look like I'm too far away. But you turn on that active stabilization, it becomes more of a 25 millimeter lens. It ends up just being a little bit easier where you just have to hold it right here and it's actually a pretty comfortable distance. Now I'll switch over to the Sony ZV-1F briefly just to show you the difference between active stabilization and standard, and you'll be able to see how much wider it actually is. We're currently on the Sony ZV-1F. You could probably hear the audio is a little bit different because I am not using the Rode Video Micro. However, right here, my arm is right against my chest. So this is a pretty tight shot, but the camera's pretty much right in my face. It's probably about, I don't know, a foot from my face. Now, this is pretty comfortable. This is fully extended. This is pretty comfortable though. Just with this camera does solve that problem where this is a lot more of a camera of, you could just pull it out of your pocket, open the screen, it powers on, boom, there you go, you're ready to vlog. It's in your face, it's lightweight, its active stabilization is on. So this is a lot more of a pocketable camera because they gave us that wide 20 millimeter lens that now crops into about 24, 25 millimeter with the active stabilization turned on. Back in the ZV-1, we're team 1 SD card over here, which is why I have to keep stopping and start recording because I'm switching the memory card from this camera to that camera. So that's the one thing, it fixes that wide lens. That crop factor doesn't take you from a 24 to a 30 millimeter. It only takes you from a 20 to a 24, 26 millimeter, which you saw I was actually holding the camera out like this. This is where I was to get that same field of view that you just saw. So that's one big thing that they addressed, and I'm glad they did. Second thing they addressed is they actually moved the thread, I think it's a 1/4-20, from here to here. Some people have complained, why is it over here? Really doesn't matter too much to me because now you can actually screw on your tripod and you can still open the battery door. Now, no problem. You can prop this up on a tripod. I could probably use it like this, again, just so that I don't lose that little, I don't drop it and then damage the lens or damage the flip out screen if it's flipped out. But you can still switch batteries on the go. Point and shoot cameras don't have the best battery life, and you don't have to worry about constantly removing your tripod or adding an extra grip, an extra cage like I have on the Sony ZV-1. Now the third thing they did a great job with, I haven't really heard anyone talk about this, but I did notice it. Let me just show you. Boom, USB-C. I really enjoy USB-C. I like the click. It's a much easier cable to plug in. You don't have to worry about what orientation it is. It doesn't matter. I have it on my MacBook. I have it on some of my other accessories. I have it on the GoPro. I cannot wait until Sony remakes the ZV-1 and gets rid of the actual USB, micro USB, I think it's called. It's not bad, but it is just something small that I noticed. Also, I'm still using the M1 MacBook Pro, which only has two USB-C cables. So if I was to travel with my Sony ZV-1 and my MacBook, I would have to make sure that I brought a cable like this. That way I could just go from USB micro to USB to USB-C, or an SD card reader like this. Now, the reason why USB-C is so nice is because this MacBook charges with a USB-C to USB-C cable. Now follow my logic here. If I'm traveling, I think if anyone's traveling with any laptop, the MacBook or whatever, they will be bringing the charging cable because no laptop is going to last long enough for a week or two of video editing. I am not going to get on a plane or go anywhere really without the charger with this USB-C to USB-C. So guess what? USB-C, boom, USB-C connected to USB-C to the MacBook. There we go. Covered. Just for me, that's one thing that's nice to have. The price point for the iPhone 13 Pro with 256 gigabytes is $1,100. And if you want to get 512, I think it's at least $1,200 more. You're getting pretty close to like $1,300 or $1,400 after taxes here in the US. With this camera, $500 plus tax, you can get a couple of 64 gigabyte memory cards. You can get two 256 gigabyte memory cards, a 512. Really, you can just get whatever you need to get. So you have expandable storage, but also $500. You can buy two Sony ZV-1F cameras for one phone. That's something to keep in mind. This can add a lot more value and a lot more simplicity. If you're actually out there filming and you can't control your lighting, it's not always sunny, sometimes it's a bit dark, and if it's windy as well, or if you don't know what kind of area you're in, you don't want to be holding your whole lifeblood out in front of you, a lot easier to get something like this stolen or broken than get something like this stolen or broken. So just the first impressions to Sony ZV-1F. It's nice that the lens is wider. I do appreciate that they did move this thread over, and I really do like the USB-C, like I said. Now it does feel quite a bit lighter than the Sony ZV-1 as well. However, I'm using the small rig cage for the Sony ZV-1 just because I do like that it gives it a little bit of extra weight and it makes it feel a little bit better. But again, you could just add a cage to this and it'll probably have a little bit more weight where it'll feel good in the hand versus this just feels a little bit too light. Now, a couple of main negatives I can see with this is it does feel noticeably cheaper than the Sony ZV-1. So again, we are talking about a $750 camera versus a $500 camera. So this is quite a bit less expensive, but it does feel quite a bit cheaper in my hands. Now, I am not one to really get the cheaper option all the time. I would rather save up and get the better option because I know it's going to give me more value and last longer. However, I'm still not sure if I like the idea of just getting a cheaper camera that feels cheaper, is cheaper, has a cheaper autofocus system, and is just overall a cheaper camera. So one more negative I wanted to mention, and this is more just me thinking out loud. This camera does not have a hot shoe mount. It is a cold shoe mount. But what does that mean? Well, if you're using it like that, it doesn't really make a difference. I'm probably going to be using it like this all the time. I'm not going to bother with an external microphone. But Sony does make a microphone called the ECM B1 or G1. I'm not sure, but it's a small camera, and there are no wires included. It can just hook on. You can put it on the Sony ZV-1 or the ZV-E10 or any camera with a hot shoe, and you don't have to worry about taking a wire from the microphone and putting it over on here. It's one less thing you got to worry about. And with wires, sometimes wires come unplugged. You may be filming something and all of a sudden there's no audio. Pretty frustrating. I understand they had to cut costs, but that is one thing I noticed, and it really just depends on my impressions when I actually go out and start vlogging with this thing and start using it. If the onboard audio with the wind muffler is fine, then it's no problem. But if I do want to add an external microphone and not have to deal with wires, I may start to go back in the camp of, okay, the ZV-1 is a better camera because I can just work with it a little bit more. And again, like I said earlier in the video, once you have to start adding accessories to these small cameras, it doesn't really make sense to buy something because it's a small pocketable camera just because you're going to have a tripod and an external microphone. At that point, you might as well just go with whichever the best option you can get. The active stabilization I've heard and I've seen is not as good on the ZV-1F as it is in the Sony ZV-1. Now, some people I've watched on YouTube, you can see a lot of jitters in the sides of the frame. The ZV-1 does have better active stabilization. It is a better camera overall, but it really comes down to my experience with this. You don't need the best camera, the best audio, the best active stabilization when you're going out there vlogging in public. It's more about telling a story, and if anything, audio is the most important thing. As long as people can hear you, that's the most important thing, and as long as they can see you and it's not super grainy, which most cameras nowadays won't be super grainy, especially if you're out filming in sunlight in the daylight. That's really what's going to make or break it for me for this camera. How does the active stabilization do? If it's too jittery in the sides and it looks too wobbly, that's a negative. How does the audio do? Do I want to start adding an extra accessory? That's going to be a deal breaker for me. And also, would I like just being able to pull this out and film it, or would I just go back to keeping my phone as my vlog camera? Every time I go ride one of my bikes, I usually mount my GoPro on the handlebar, and if I want to take something out, I just take the phone, and I prefer just to take the phone in my back pocket, hit the little camera button, start filming, and put it back. With this, now, if I'm in a scenario where I'm actually riding my bike, it's always something else I have to take, so really, the ZV-1F the ZV-1F's main competition is this camera right here. And it's all about convenience when it comes to these. Really, whatever I find more convenient for these two is going to be the difference between me holding on to this camera or me actually returning it and saving my money to get a better camera, such as the Sony ZV-E10, or even if I want to spend the big bucks, Sony a7 IV. One other negative that I don't like, I almost forgot to mention, is the lens cap. Not a big deal, right? But it is one extra thing you got to do. Got to pull it out, take the lens cap off, make sure you don't lose this thing, put it in your pocket, and if you do, oh well. The Sony ZV-1, it comes out and it retracts, it closes. You don't have to worry about a lens cap. Should you have a lens cap on your iPhone? Probably, but I've never scratched an iPhone. You know, how often do we take this in and out of our pockets? Constantly. So that's something else that I almost forgot to mention, that may also be a deal breaker if I just find it more convenient to keep using my phone and just make sure I'm in good light and hide from the wind basically, or get another microphone for this phone. So as always, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed my explanation of my first impressions, my first analysis of the Sony ZV-1F. Stay tuned. In the next month or so, I will be taking this out and doing a vlog test just to see how I like it, and it should be a good time. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.